started with our first news. When asked about Alex Pereira's past performance against Magomed Ankalaev, UFC welterweight Gilbert Burns offered a very honest and insightful take. Burns doesn't believe Pereira was competing anywhere close to his full potential in their first fight. In fact, he suggested that Pereira may have been operating at less than half of his best that night. According to Burns, if Pereira enters the octagon this weekend at 100%, the result will be dramatically different. He sees Pereira finishing Ankalaev. Burns began by acknowledging Ankalaev's toughness. The way I see it, he explained, Ankalaev is a very durable, very hard to beat fighter. But that night, Pereira wasn't himself. He didn't look 100%. Everyone could sense it. He wasn't pulling the trigger. He wasn't letting his shots go. Burns emphasized that Pereira appeared hesitant, particularly early in the fight, when he seemed overly concerned about Ankalaev's takedown threat. According to Burns, this hesitation wasn't just mental, it stemmed from physical issues Pereira had been dealing with leading into the fight. He later admitted that he got a little sick when he traveled to Australia. Burns said, when he came back, he wasn't feeling well at all. On top of that, he wasn't working out properly. He was traveling everywhere, being treated like a star, doing appearances and commitments. It didn't look like he was locked into training camp in the way he should have been. Burns noted that although Pereira's takedown defense looked solid later in the fight, he simply couldn't find the rhythm to launch his striking game. The Brazilian powerhouse is usually known for his explosiveness, knockout power, and ability to dictate the pace of a fight, but against Ankalaev he looked flat. He just didn't let go, Burns explained. And when you have a fighter like Pereira who isn't firing on all cylinders, that's a huge problem. However, Burns is convinced that a fully prepared and healthy Pereira is an entirely different animal. If this guy shows up 100%, I believe he knocks out Ankalaev, Burns stated confidently. That would be incredible for MMA. Pereira has already done things that people thought were impossible, moving up divisions, taking on bigger and stronger guys, and still finding ways to win. A dominant performance against Ankalaev would just cement his legacy even further. Burns also pointed out the excitement such a fight generates for the MMA community, especially for fans and media channels covering the event. This is the type of fight that makes people tune in, talk about it, and even stream it live. It's the kind of moment that can shift the narrative in the UFC. Everyone is going to be paying attention. In conclusion, Burns believes the first fight between Pereira and Ankalaev was not a true reflection of what Pereira is capable of. He was under the weather, spread thin by obligations, and not in peak condition. But if Pereira comes into this rematch healthy, rested, and fully focused, Burns sees no doubt Alex Pereira will put Ankalaev away. Before moving on to the next news, we have a quick request for you. We're always working to improve our content and truly value your support. If you could take a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon, it would mean a lot to us. That way, you'll never miss an update. Move on to another news. Conor McGregor has once again captured the spotlight, this time by making a bold claim about his highly anticipated return to the octagon. According to McGregor, his long-rumored fight at the White House is not just speculation anymore, it's officially signed, sealed, and finalized. In typical McGregor fashion, he delivered the news with confidence and authority. It's a done deal, signed, delivered. This isn't a negotiation. The fight is happening, he declared. For months, there had been whispers about McGregor potentially competing on American soil in a historic setting, but his words seemed to remove any doubt. He insisted that everything necessary to move forward has already been completed, and that fans can expect to see him headline in what would be one of the most unique and groundbreaking events in combat sports history. The Irish superstar went on to emphasize what such a fight would mean, not only for his career but for the larger MMA community. McGregor will compete at the White House for UFC's America 250, he said proudly, framing the event as a symbolic moment that could spark massive fan engagement and cultural impact. For McGregor, the White House card isn't just another fight, it's a milestone that highlights the UFC's global reach and his role in elevating the sport to new heights. When asked about UFC President Dana White's involvement in finalizing the event, McGregor was quick to clarify that there was no conflict or delay in the process. Me and Dana are in constant communication, he explained. We've done incredible business together over the years. I'm the highest generating fighter in the history of the UFC, and Dana knows that. He's always had my back, and I've always delivered inside the cage. McGregor also connected the announcement to the UFC's recent massive business deal, a partnership that he believes further solidifies the promotion's dominance in sports entertainment. They've just signed a breathtaking deal with Paramount, moving to cable television with a $7.7 billion agreement. That deal has been approved and is ready ready to go," McGregor said. "This is about taking the UFC to the next level, and who better to lead the charge than me? Bring in the big dog, the MAC By linking his own fight announcement with the UFC's monumental financial success, McGregor is positioning himself not just as a fighter returning to competition, but as a central figure in the organization's global expansion. He's reinforcing his brand as both a fighter and a showman, reminding fans and critics alike that he remains the sport's biggest draw. As of now, all signs point to McGregor being serious about his White House fight. Whether this announcement will hold exactly as stated remains to be seen, but his confidence and tone suggest he's convinced the pieces are already in place. If true, this would be one of the most historic and talked about moments in UFC history, a fight card taking place on the grounds of the White House, with McGregor front and center. For McGregor, this is about legacy, spectacle, and once again proving that he's not just part of the game, he's the one driving it forward. Move on to another news. Michael Bisping has offered an intriguing take on the future of Ilia Topuria's first lightweight title defense, and it's one that may surprise many fans. While much of the MMA community is convinced that Topuria's next opponent will be Paddy Pimblett, Bisping believes there's a strong chance Justin Gaethje could be the man to get the shot. The former UFC middleweight champion explained that Gaethje himself has openly admitted he's at a crossroads in his career. The highlight has said that if he doesn't get a title fight soon, retirement may be his only option. This statement, however, didn't sit well with UFC President Dana White, who was less than enthusiastic about fighters framing themselves in such a way. Dana made it clear that in his view, if an athlete is already considering retirement, perhaps they shouldn't be stepping into the octagon at all. That said, Bisping argued that Gaethje's track record, star power, and undeniable fighting style still make him a legitimate candidate for the title shot. He called Gaethje the human highlight reel, for good reason. Nearly every one of his UFC appearances has delivered fight of the night moments and fan-favorite action. Despite having already fought for the championship twice, Bisping believes Gaethje's contributions to the sport and his time served inside the cage warrant another opportunity at the belt. On the other hand, Paddy Pimblett remains one of the most popular fighters in the UFC, and a matchup with Topuria would almost certainly be a blockbuster event. Stylistically, it's a fight that promises chaos. Pimblett is relentless, applying constant pressure with his aggressive, unorthodox style, while Topuria himself is a powerful striker with pinpoint precision. The star power of Pimblett combined with Topuria's current undefeated streak could make this one of the UFC's biggest events in recent memory. Gaethje, by contrast, offers a completely different but equally appealing matchup. Known as one of the most violent and aggressive fighters in the sport, his battles have become the stuff of legend. Pairing him with Topuria would almost guarantee fireworks, a clash between two fighters who thrive in high-risk, high-reward exchanges. For purists and longtime fans of the sport, this could be the fight to make. Bisping went on to emphasize that Topuria cannot sit idle for long. He's the reigning champion, Bisping noted. If he doesn't fight, then the UFC will be forced to strip him of the title. He's already vacated the featherweight belt, so he has to defend his lightweight crown to keep his momentum going. As far as Bisping is concerned, it's essentially a 50-50 scenario right now. With Arman Tsarukyan out of the immediate title conversation, the two clear options are Justin Gaethje or Paddy Pimblett. If forced to place a bet, Bisping admitted he'd lean toward Gaethje, citing the veteran's experience, entertainment value, and his reputation for consistently delivering Fight of the Year performances. Finally, Bisping shared his personal view on Topuria himself. He believes the undefeated Spanish-Georgian star might just be the pound-for-pound greatest fighter in the sport at this moment. "Come at me in the comment section if you want," Bisping said, "but that's just my opinion. In the end, whether it's the chaotic rise of Paddy Pimblett or the battle-tested firepower of Justin Gaethje, one thing is clear: Ilia Topuria's first lightweight title defense is shaping up to be one of the most exciting matchups of the year." Move on to another news. Quinton "Rampage" Jackson has never been one to hold back his words, and his latest comments about longtime rival Vanderlay Silva prove that time hasn't softened his outspoken nature. Following Silva's chaotic exhibition boxing match last weekend, Rampage offered his unfiltered reaction, and it wasn't flattering. The event turned into a spectacle for all the wrong reasons. Silva, competing in a boxing exhibition, was disqualified after repeatedly throwing illegal headbutts at his opponent. The controversy didn't end there. After the disqualification, tempers boiled over and a wild brawl erupted inside the ring. In the chaos, Silva was knocked out cold, not by his scheduled opponent, but by his opponent's son, who jumped into the fray. For Rampage Jackson, the incident was both predictable and telling. Vanderlay was being a bully in that fight, he said bluntly, and the whole MMA world knows Vanderlay Silva has always been a bully. He was headbutting that guy. That's not fighting, that's just dirty. Rampage made it clear that his criticism wasn't about taking a cheap shot at Silva's legacy, but about calling out behavior he has never respected. I don't care what people think about me, he continued. One thing about me, I don't like bullies. And Vanderlay was acting like a bully in there. The rivalry between Rampage and Silva is one of the most storied in MMA history. The two men clashed multiple times in Pride Fighting Championships and later in the UFC, producing some of the most brutal and unforgettable battles in combat sports. Silva earned his reputation as one of the most aggressive and violent strikers of his era, while Rampage was known for his power, toughness, and unshakable confidence. Their animosity was real, both inside and outside the cage, and even now, years later, the animus clearly remains. Rampage's comments also highlight the broader conversation around Silva's recent behavior and late career choices. For many fans, watching a legend of Silva's stature resort to illegal tactics and then suffer a knockout in a chaotic post-fight brawl was a disappointing sight. Silva was once revered for his ferocious fighting style, earning the nickname, the Axe Murderer, for his relentless aggression. But Rampage believes the same intensity that once made Silva feared has often crossed into the territory of intimidation and unsportsmanlike conduct. This wasn't about heart, skill, or legacy, Rampage said. It was about bullying. He got disqualified for a reason, and then he got knocked out after the fight by someone who wasn't even supposed to be in the ring. That tells you everything you need to know. While some fans may view Rampage's words as harsh, others believe he's simply speaking the truth. Silva's headbutts were clear violations, and his behavior overshadowed whatever competitiveness the exhibition match might have offered. For Rampage, the message is simple: respect the sport and respect your opponents. At the end of the day, he concluded, fighters should fight with honor. You don't need to cheat. You don't need to bully. The sport is about skill and heart, and that's why I'll never stand with bullies. Move on to another news. Robert Whittaker has weighed in on the growing debate surrounding Alex Pereira's dominance in the UFC, and his take has sparked plenty of discussion. While Pereira's striking abilities have dazzled fans and established him as one of the sport's most dangerous stand-up fighters, Whittaker believes there's one man from the past who would have been an absolute nightmare matchup for Coatan, former two-division UFC champion Daniel Cormier. Speaking on his MMA Arcade podcast, Whittaker explained that Pereira's rise has been nothing short of extraordinary. Since debuting in the UFC in 2022, Pereira has climbed rapidly through the ranks, collecting highlight reel knockouts and championship belts in 2 weight classes. His power, precision, and composure inside the cage have cemented his reputation as a generational striker. Yet, as Whittaker pointed out, Pereira's defensive grappling remains a question mark, and that could have spelled trouble if he'd faced a prime Cormier. You know who would have given Alex absolute hell? DC, Whittaker said. Light heavyweight DC would have ran him over. I reckon John Jones and DC ran that division back in the day, and there wasn't really anyone to take their spots. Whittaker elaborated that Cormier's world-class wrestling, Olympic pedigree, and relentless forward pressure would have nullified Pereira's striking advantage. Cormier's ability to close distance, clinch, and control opponents on the ground made him one of the most dominant fighters of his era. Against a striker like Pereira, who thrives in space, Cormier's grinding style would have been suffocating. But Cormier isn't the only fighter Whittaker believes poses problems for Pereira. He also mentioned Magomed Ankalaev as a stylistic challenge that could unravel the Brazilian's momentum. I think Ankalaev is the antithesis to Alex stylistically, Whittaker explained. You look at Pereira's opponents, he's run through them, but those guys weren't the type to beat him. They were strikers. Ankalaev has the wrestling, the grappling, and the patience to really test him. Whittaker pointed out that while Pereira's victory over Jan Blachowicz was impressive, it showed cracks in his game. That fight was closely contested, with Blachowicz grappling giving Pereira some issues. I think Jan was a good shout to beat him, Whittaker said, and we saw how close that fight really was. The former middleweight champion argued that the current light heavyweight division lacks many of the heavy wrestling-based fighters that could exploit Pereira's ground vulnerabilities. Most of Pereira's recent opponents have been primarily strikers, and while his stand-up dominance is undeniable, the absence of elite grapplers has left a lingering question about how he would fare against them. For Whittaker, the fantasy matchup between Pereira and Cormier is especially fascinating because it highlights an era when wrestling-heavy fighters like DC and John Jones ruled the light heavyweight division. In today's landscape, striking seems to dominate the top tier, but back then, grappling was often often the deciding factor at the championship level. Pereira is phenomenal, no doubt, Whittaker concluded, but styles make fights, and if you put him in there against prime DC, that's a completely different story. DC wouldn't just test him, he'd run him over. Move on to another news. Kamaru Usman and Henry Cejudo have never been shy about making bold predictions, and ahead of this weekend's bantamweight title fight, both legends are backing Corey Sandhagen to shock the MMA world. The matchup pits Sandhagen against the relentless grappler Merab Dvalishvili, a fighter widely regarded as one of the toughest outs in the division. Yet, despite the odds and Merab's ironclad reputation, Usman and Cejudo believe Sandhagen has the tools to pull off the upset and become the new UFC bantamweight champion. Usman began by highlighting what makes Sandhagen such a unique challenge. "I'm going with Corey because he's a technician," Usman said confidently. "He knows how to cut angles, he knows how to find those openings, and he's going to land the bigger, more significant shots. The guy is so hard to put away. I don't know if anyone's ever finished him clean outside of Aljamain Sterling, and that was years ago. Corey is durable, smart, and patient. That's a dangerous combination." Henry Cejudo, himself a former two-division UFC champion, echoed that sentiment but went even deeper into the technical side of the matchup. According to Cejudo, Sandhagen's composure will be the deciding factor. "If Corey can stay composed under pressure, he has all the tools," Cejudo explained. "He's got the hands, the knees, the elbows. His striking diversity is second to none in this division. He's a true sharpshooter, one of the cleanest stand-up fighters I've ever seen in the bantamweight ranks. If he keeps his gas tank steady and avoids panicking against Merab's constant takedown attempts, I see him winning this fight." Cejudo didn't downplay the threat Dvalishvili poses, though. He acknowledged that Merab's best chance at victory lies in his wrestling-heavy approach. "Merab's method of winning is clear," Cejudo said. "He's going to shoot for the takedowns, chain wrestle, and grind on Corey from start to finish. He'll look to land some ground strikes, but those aren't always going to count as significant. The real question is whether he can keep Corey down long enough to sap that energy. If it turns into a pure stand-up fight, Corey has the advantage every single time." Usman then added a personal perspective, noting how difficult it is to bet against Merab given his reputation as one of the hardest-working athletes in the sport. But at the same time, Usman stressed that this fight feels like Sandhagen's moment. "It's tough, man, because Merab is one of the greatest bantamweights we've seen in terms of grit and pressure. But sometimes you can't ignore what your gut tells you. My heart says this is Corey's fight. I think this is when we hear those words, and knew." In the end, both Usman and Cejudo agreed that while Merab has the relentless motor and wrestling to make it ugly, Sandhagen's technical striking, durability, and creativity give him a clear path to victory. If he can control the tempo, stay composed, and force the fight into his wheelhouse, the upset could become reality. For two decorated champions like Usman and Cejudo to put their faith in Sandhagen speaks volumes. This weekend, the bantamweight division may witness a new king.